Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Power Driven Podcast. Today is a user-requested episode. We appreciate all the comments. We've had a lot of comments, a lot of requests for common rail tuning info. We talked about it briefly in the past, and we got a lot of response for people asking for more information on people who want to tune their common rail trucks. So we are going to grant your wish today and turn the time over to Meyer.
Wait, oh boy. Common rail, I can add this right at the beginning. A common rail is not like a 95 junker drag truck. That would be like,
dude, I was literally starting a stopwatch.
That would be like,
I was like, let's see him do it.
Yeah.
So common rail is a 2003 and newer Dodge Ram Cummins diesel.
Yes.
Because they have common rail injection. I guess similar principles could apply to a Duramax or the newer Fords, like the 6.7 Scorpion and newer. So
6.4 liter went.
Oh, 6.4s. Yeah.
Yep.
So 08 and newer Fords. 01 and newer Chevys, and 03 and newer Dodge diesel. And then all the other brands, they kind of relate, but
yeah, there'd be definitely similar things. I actually learned to tune my common rail by buying a Duramax tuning book from, who was that guy who used to sell that book? Starlight, yeah. He's a big Duramax tuner. I'm like, probably principles are close enough. And I read through that book and kind of figured it out and started tuning my own truck and had a lot of success. Not as much as we do now. I'm definitely not, my stuff was not near as good as it is now, but that's how I started. But anyway, we have had a lot of requests on tuning. Like the guy, hey, I got a truck and I want to tune it. I'm kind of a hobbyist, and I like, for me personally, it's very fun to like do as much as I can myself. I really enjoy that. So, for the guy who's just thinking, okay, I've just picked up my 06 or whatever Dodge, or, what's first? First thing you got to figure out is, well, what tuning software are you going to use?
Yeah. So I'm going to say for this talk, we're going to focus on the 03 to 07, like 5.9 common rail trucks. I mean, some of the principles still apply. Like you get to different setups, but for what we're talking about, that's where we're going to focus. And yeah, like if you have yourself a common rail and you want to start playing with it, just know, like, doing your own tuning, especially if you know nothing, that is a huge time suck. Like, there are so many revisions you're going to go through, try new things, and a lot of the professional tuners already know what works, what doesn't, and that's like why they're professional.
So if you're tuning to save money, that's a fallacy. You're not going to save money.
I think you can save money and time elsewhere, and just go ahead.
A minimum wage job would be cheaper than learning how to tune your own truck.
I would say probably yes.
You'd be money ahead.
If it's something you want to do, we all understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I mess with my own stuff just because, it's like, it is super fun and super rewarding, and you want to try new theories and new techniques and play around with this, play around with that. I mean, like, I came from a 12 valve where I could just play with the plate and do whatever, and when I hit the pedal, I knew exactly what was happening and like what was contacting what, and it was fun. I went to the common rail world, and I my first truck, I got a tune for it from a very reputable guy, and it was awesome. It drove great, but it was like not as fun not knowing the magic behind it. Like, I knew that when I gave it throttle, it was going to give it more fuel, but why? And so for me, I was willing to spend the time and try to figure it out, and I think it is very rewarding. But if you're trying to do it because you're just trying to save money, probably not the play. If you're trying to do it because you are just genuinely curious and you want to play with it, and you're willing to waste a bunch of time finding out and playing,
you will spend a lot of time.
It is fun, and
it's rewarding.
It's very rewarding. Yeah.
I mean, your truck now, you're going to be knocking on 2,000 horsepower here hopefully pretty soon, and all with your own tuning and your own build.
And that's what's funny.
Obviously, we build upon what we've learned from other people.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm not the tuning daddy in any sense. I have multiple people that I go to with questions when I'm stumped or I want to try something new.
So we should call you Tune Daddy Junior.
I'm Tune Junior.
I'm Tuning Junior. Okay. Hey, Tuner Junior.
No. But
I would have loved if someone called me Tig Daddy Junior, but I'm just not that cool.
No, you don't even TIG. You MIG weld WFT stack WTF weld tags on your work.
You use AC on steel. It's just, you just didn't even get it.
I'm still getting aluminum and stainless filler confused. So I can't really talk.
I mean, last night I was welding on a trailer and I MIG welded through paint successfully. You have to do 2 passes, but it works.
It works. Yeah, you gotta do the hoops technique to burn off the paint on the first one, and then you get a nice, good deep penetration in the next one. Okay. Anyway, we digress. So I was like thinking about it. I'm like, people have asked this a lot of like how, like, trying to tune their own truck, like, where do you start? Like, what are the techniques or whatever else? And I'm always just like, I'm not really a super professional tuner. Like, when you buy power driven tunes, I'm not the one doing it. Thank God.
Yeah.
But I know the basics, and I kind of like started thinking about it more, and I'm like, really, I do think if I could if I could talk to myself 5 years ago, I could definitely help myself out.
Yeah.
And so like, that's why we're here, is like kind of help people with those basics. One thing that is funny, like people talk about, oh, you tune your own truck. Like you mentioned, like, oh, you're knocking on the door of, 2,000 horsepower or whatever.
Fuel only,
whatever. Micro record that no one cares about.
I know, it's still cool. It's just cool to achieve another 4 digits. It's just cool.
It's just like,
doesn't matter if it's been done before. It's still cool.
What's funny about it is that to make, like, when you look at your all the tables in EFI, like we're going to talk about EFI mostly here.
That's shorthand. You got to use
Live.
longer. EFI Live.
EFI Live. When you look at all the tables, there's only when it comes to peak power, there's only a couple that really matter, and the ones that really matter.
Cells or tables.
So the couple tables like limiter tables and stuff like that, but the ones that really matter, it's not even the whole table that you care about. It's that bottom right corner, and that's where your full throttle, part of that table is. Full power, full throttle, full fuel pressure, whatever it is. And so that's what it takes. And that's the difference between a good tuner and I would say a great tuner. Is a good tuner understands things and understands what to do, and can go into their truck and make changes and tweak and play around. A great tuner knows what all that stuff's supposed to be and knows how to make that big power drive well. And that's going to be the hardest part of anyone trying to tune their own truck, is not just making the power. That's like the 20%. That's fairly easy. You can figure that out pretty quickly. You can floor it at different pressures or timings and see which one makes the most power. Boom, done.
If you have access to a dyno.
On the street, doesn't matter. You can do whatever.
Yeah, you can pretty much just command fuel until you start losing rail pressure. That's going to max your fuel system.
You watch your smoke output. You can like drag it. You can record your acceleration. There's a lot of different options you have for like figuring out how much power you're making, and you can just play with a couple different settings. And generally, it's pretty quick to find what works fairly well, especially on those lower power levels. Like you're trying to talk 500 horse, you can floor that thing thousands of times and you're fine. When you start talking big power, it's like, okay, you can't do that. You're going to blow it up eventually. You don't want to waste all of your engine's life on figuring out what makes the most power. And that's what the difference between a great tuner is. Like they will sacrifice an engine in the name of science and learning. So anyway, I kind of feel like I'm getting ahead of myself here, but
I think beginner tuners will also sacrifice an engine in the name of science.
And that's
like not even their own engine. They call themselves a tuner and they write tunes for people and they blow it up and they go, whoops, that fingered the timing table. I know next time 60 degrees is too much timing at idle.
Yeah. And I mean, that's very true. And I guess I feel like I need to start from the top. And I just want to clarify that, like, just because I'm capable of tuning my truck, I don't think I'm a great tuner. I'm good enough to tune it, drive it, figure out what I did wrong and fix it and play with it and finesse it and get it where it runs well. A great tuner would just know, like, oh, you have this turbo and these injectors. Like, here, this is a tune that will work great for you and it will work. But anyway, going back to the beginning, you mentioned picking what platform. So EFI Live, I would say, of the ones I'm familiar with, is the easiest platform to tune with. Now, you have experience with HP. I don't have a lot. I do think it's fairly straightforward.
Using shorthand again, HP tuners.
HP tuners, thank you.
Which in the world of gas performance seems to be the preferred tuning platform.
So I've used it quite a bit on the Ford Power Stroke platform. And it's similar.
I'm sure it's straightforward. And so you get to choose between either of those. On the year ranges we're talking about here, that, the 03 to 07, 5.9 common rails. If you want a 5-position switch, you have to go with EFI Live, as far as I know. And so that's why I think it's a great option. It gives you those possibilities. And when it comes to making changes, you've got a 5-position switch with 5 different table options in there. Well, what that means is now you can put slight differences into all 5. And so like when you're setting it up, you'll probably have all 5 tables, or at least 4 of the tables, having the same exact power, fuel pressure, all that stuff, and you'll change maybe the timing table and say, okay, this one has less, this one a little more, and then you get to drive it for the next week, 2 weeks, and you get to drive in all the different tables and be like, you know what, Tune 3 is the one I like to drive the best because of this reason or that reason. Okay, Tune 3 is now my new base. I'm gonna load that calibration into the.
So I'm gonna dumb down the strategy a little bit just so people can follow along. Okay. So you basically have 5 available tune files that you can run at any time with the switch. Yep. One of them you kind of keep as your safe that always works so that you can get home. The other 4 are your play tunes. And your strategy is you make all 4 very nearly identical with small changes in just timing or whatever you're trying to research.
Timing, whatever that is you're playing with.
And so then you can validate instead of, because there's no manual that says, hey, this table does exactly this. It has a description, I assume, that says this is the pressure table, but how do you know if it 20 MPa or 150 MPa is the right answer?
Yeah. And so like, and I'll get more into the basics. I feel like I keep getting ahead of myself, but yeah, like, that way you can go in and make one change to one table and just make it slightly different across all of them, figure out what you like driving the best. And then now you can say, okay, this is my new base table. This is safe. This runs great. I can put this as my safe one. And then you can go through and load up another round of changes. And that's what you'll do it with your timing tables, your fuel pressure tables, just a couple different things. Even there's boost limited fueling table. It's a very easy table to manipulate. It's actually one of the easiest, but it's a lot of knowledge to say, okay, at 10 pounds of boost, how much fuel do you want? Who knows? Well, play around with it. Try different settings and say, oh, I like this one. It came up fast, but it wasn't too smoky. Okay, cool. Oh, it's clean here. It's dirty there. I got to go in back and change. But anyway, like that's definitely a very helpful technique. And that's what's nice about 06, 07 is they let you run the EFI Live, gives you the 5-position switch. Once you get older than the 06, so you got your 04, 05 and older, then I think the best option is either HP or MM3. I personally use MM3. It's not a very straightforward software. It's not great for beginners just because it's harder to like manipulate the numbers. And so if you are stuck with an MM3 like 0305 truck, what I would do is I would use MM3 to load the tunes. Actually, let me split that year range. There's 04.5 to 05. That I would recommend MM3 because yes, it doesn't give you that 5-position switch, but they use what's called RTG files, where you save the RTG file in the SD card. And then when you're driving down the road, you can't just click a switch, but you can go use your MM3 monitor and select a new RTG file. And that lets you load up. The ECM does not have the hard drive capacity to hold those files in it, but you're using the SD card to hold it, and then you just flash it in. And so you can do it while you're driving down the road. It takes like 20 seconds. When you start talking about the 0304 trucks, 846.
So it's not good enough for like a stoplight race. So you can't be in your street tune and then also, oh my gosh, I got to beat this Hellcat.
I mean, being able to click switches would be nice, but at least with that, it's nice because at least you can go down the road and you can make changes. You're not having to reflash because your 0304 trucks, MM3, HP are both good options because either way, you're going to have to sit there and cycle the key a couple times, wait 10 minutes anytime you make a tune change. And that's much harder to develop tuning on because now every time you want to make any single change, small change, you have to flash in a new change, a new file, which like when you've got either 5-position switch or an RTG file in the newer trucks, now you can be driving down the road and be like, okay, I just floored it. It was this smoky. It acted like this. I'm going to change it. And 20 seconds later, you can be flooring it again or playing with it again and say, yeah, this one definitely acts better. Oh, no, I don't like how it acted. So your 0304 trucks, HP or MM3, whatever, but your 04 to 05, your 848 ECM trucks, I would recommend MM3. And the trick with that one is if you are a beginner and you're learning, don't try to learn in MM3 software because it's pretty terrible. Download EFI Live. The tables are almost identical, but use your EFI Live to create your tune file and then copy paste all the files into MM3.
Now, is there more like, let's say YouTube University stuff on EFI Live? Is that why it's a little easier too?
It's just, I'm sure
just purely the software is easier.
I would say there's more support for it because it is like it's a larger platform and it covers more platforms, but it's just the whole nature of the software. It has way better blending table, like blending stuff.
The tools.
It has timing calculator built into it. And like, it's a stupid thing. MM3, when you copy a table, it copies the whole axis and everything. And back in the day, it wasn't copying zeros. I think they fixed that. So if you had a table that was half zeros, it wouldn't copy that. So if you tried to paste that into another table, not only are you trying to copy and paste the axes of the table as well, and so it doesn't paste correctly, but anything that you copied that was a zero, it's not going to overwrite. It's going to act like a blank space, so it's just going to leave what was in the new table. And so there's just a couple things. Well, that's what's nice about EFI is that you can then create your table in EFI Live, copy the whole thing, and then just paste it. And so the trick there is to make sure that your axes are set up correctly and the values across both of them are the same. But once you do a little background work, make sure everything is set up correctly. Now you can go in and save your EFI Live, make changes in EFI Live and just copy paste them in, and it's rather straightforward.
This probably is like maybe overkill for our audience, but I just want you to understand when he says your axes, what he means is the same.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you already hit?
No, I don't think I did.
I just feel like, because you have, when he says axes, you have two things are your parameters, and you're tuning the result of that. So maybe it's boost an RPM or something like that.
Yeah. So like an example of that would be the one of your newest best friends is the US table. The US table looks at your fuel.
What is US?
It's microseconds of injection, and so that's how, like in
common real world, the injector turns on.
It's how many millionths of a second the injector is held open for. And so factory injectors are calibrated to a certain specification within a certain range, and then the axes of the table are the fuel pressure you're at and the amount of fuel requested. And so it says, okay, like if the computer wants or the truck wants 100 mm cubed of fuel.
So that's the cubic millimeters of fuel,
cubic millimeter of fuel, and it says, okay, we're at 100 MPa of rail. It says, okay,
so at 100 micropascals of rail.
Yep, rail pressure. Yep, it says, okay, we want this much. We have this much pressure. That means we have to hold the injector open for 1200 US or whatever that number is. And if you are trying to copy paste from either a different tune file or, like in our case, what we're talking about is EFI Live copy pasting. Maybe the axes are set up differently, and maybe they both end at the same point of 180 MPa or whatever it is. But if it's the table goes
differently,
it's scaled differently. Maybe one's like 100, 120, 140, 160, 180, and the other one's 100, 112, 130, whatever it is. And so if they're not scaled the same, when you copy paste it, you're going to get a different result, which that throws off your timing tables and everything else. So it's important to just do your due diligence before you start just copy pasting, making sure your axes are set up the same. Yep. And like I say, that's why EFI is really nice, because you can just do it all in there. But MM3, it's for those 04 or 05 trucks, it's kind of what you got, and it's fine. But
so a lot of these tables are set up almost like a graphic spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet, where there's an x-axis, y-axis, and there's values in there. And when you connect the two, like you were saying there, and then why would you be copy and pasting when you're doing a tune? Aren't you just manually entering the value in each square?
So, I mean, when you start off tuning, you're going to start off with what's there. I don't recommend just going and just, wrecking havoc on the whole file. Like, start small, but you will be copy pasting because you have 5 different like once you enable the CSP5 switch, now you have 5 tunes that if you want them all to act the exact same, you have to sit there and copy paste each an individual one so they're all the same, and then you can go in and make your small changes. But so
you're going to do a lot of table, for example, you have to duplicate that 5 times, and there you would want, after you had typed one in, you'd want to copy and paste that on the others.
And then aside from that, there's also a lot of, like, the timing tables and stuff have like altitude correction tables, and so at different altitudes it'll pick different timing tables. So you have like 5 of the identical timing table, and that in factory form they're slightly different, and so that depending on your altitude or your atmospheric or barometric pressure or whatever, it will go in and pick which one it wants to pull from. That way at different altitudes the truck will pull from different timings. I would say to start off with, just make them all the same. It's not worth trying to pinpoint what does what. Once you got the truck dialed and you're like, oh yeah, I like this, and you go up to high altitude and you're like, yeah, I do want to play with some lower timing there. Cool, try it. But for now, just for beginning, I would say most tuners are just making them all the same. And then in down below in one of the tables, you can say at different barometric pressures which table to pull from. It's like it shows like, oh, at this pressure, this pressure, this pressure. And it's like in factory form, it says, okay, pull from tune 1, pull from tune 1, pull from tune 2, tune 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, whatever. Just make them all one. That way when you're going in, you know which table it's going to pull from. And so just makes it easier.
So in EFI Live, do they practice redundance where they make all the tables the same and tell it to only reference one table?
That's
where is that a style?
In your CSP5 tables, so there's like basically picture it 5 folders that all have the same stuff in it, and depending on which where the switch is and what tune file you're in, it'll pick from the different ones. They only actually have in those folders, because you only have limited room in the ECM. They only have like the base one, which is what it uses when it's confused. Like if you disconnect your barometric pressure sensor, it has no idea, so it uses that one. Or it uses atmospheric. I think it has atmospheric pressure 1 and atmospheric pressure 2. 3, 4, and 5 aren't even in those tables. So if you have it referencing 4, 5, 3, 4, or 5, it's going to go into the main one, which means that they'll all be the same. Because like the using the 5 position switch is like a patch where they say, oh, we have a little extra room in the ECM. Let's make it so these guys can have different five different tables in there, which is awesome, but they don't have enough room to make 5 versions of everything. So they kind of had to pick. And so some of that stuff is, you can't, if you have a reference 3, 4, 5, your pressures are all going to be the same because there's only one of those tables. Your timing is going to be the same because there's only one of those tables, and that's all down below. And so that's why, like, if you want to get, start finessing with it a lot, you really only have 3 that you can, or 2 that you can pick from now. You can't pick from 5 like you could have in factory form. But either way, yeah, it's a lot. But I guess to start off with on, like, let's just say you have an 06, you're in EFI, it's awesome, and you want to tune it, you got your license, you figured out how to pull the factory file out. Now you're looking at this file and you're like, dang, where do I start? First of all, I would say start small. Like if you go in and try to wreak havoc on every single table, you're going to probably have issues and you're not know where to start. I remember the first time I did it, I wrecked havoc in there. And because I mean, my first truck I ever tuned was my my common rail swap 2nd gen. So it's a standalone. There's a lot of things that are wrong with it. Like the ECM is freaking out because half the sensors are gone. And I was like, oh, I'll just get rid of all this crap. And I just wrecked havoc in there and it literally tried to run away. I was like, cool. I was like, I guess I got to start over from scratch because I'm like, I don't know what table it was that I messed with that screwed it up. And so I had to like start from scratch. And so that would be one piece of advice I'd give you is start small, start playing with different tables, and see what it does. The first thing you're going to mess with is start getting rid of your limiting tables. Like maybe there's a couple barometric pressure ones. There's like high boost, low boost, fuel pressure, just different things like that. You'll start getting rid of those. And what you can do is you can floor it, data log it, and watch what the desired MMs cubed is. So I guess I'm probably need to slow down again. The way the ECM works in there, at idle, the ECM says, okay, I want to maintain 700 RPM. Once you start giving it throttle, it says, okay, this guy wants more. And so what it does is it does math equations based on different things, including your throttle pedal, to figure out how many mm cubed, so cubic millimeters of fuel it should inject. Once it figures that out and passes it past all the limiters to make sure, yep, no limiters, and it should be limiting me right now. It says, okay, we want to inject this much. And then it says, okay, in order to inject this much, we're at this much fuel pressure and we want this much mm cubed. We should hold the injector open for 1,000 microseconds. Cool. Then aside from that, it says, okay, where do we put it in? Like at what timing do we use to put it in at? It says, okay, there's a table for that. It says, okay, we're at this much RPM and we want this much quantity of fuel. Again, let's just say 3,000 RPM and 100 mm cubed of fuel. It says, okay, look at this table. We want to run, 12 degrees of timing, whatever it happens to be. Hopefully it's more than that, 3,000, but whatever. So then it says that. Now, then lastly, it has the fuel pressure. It says, okay, we're at this many RPM and we want that same 100 mm cubed of fuel. That means we should be trying to command and create, call it 20,000 PSI of rail pressure. And you can set it to PSI or MPa or whatever, but either way. And that's how it decides all those things. When you data log, if you floor a stock truck, there's a lot of limiters going on. And so the best thing you can do, instead of just going through and just getting rid of every limiter, especially in MM3, because they give you access to ones that you really shouldn't be touching, go in it, use an on-ramp or something, floor it, data log and see, okay, maybe it's at 2,400 RPM. I'm at 99 mm cubed and I'm 3,000 RPM. I'm at this 112 mm cubed, whatever. And now go into the table and find, okay, which limiter matches up with that and is close to say, okay, it's probably this limiter here it's riding on. And so now you can go in and the maximum the ECM is going to command is about 150. So you can set it to really anything above 150, 200, whatever it is. And so it's out of the way, and then try it again. And if you were successful, it should have a little bit more power and be riding on against a different limiter. And so you can kind of find the different limiters you need to be touching that way. And then once you got it to where it's commanding 150 mm cubed across the whole RPM range, you know that, hey, you got it.
How many limiters are on, like, let's say an 06 Dodge with the EFI Live?
06, the EFI Live trucks aren't bad. The MM3, there's a lot. But 06, like your EFI Live stuff, if I had to guess, you're going to find probably about a dozen or so.
Well, just list off some of them. So there's a smoke limiter, right? There's a smoke limiting table.
So yeah, there's a boost limited fueling table. Some people max that one out. I don't like getting rid of it because I like having it come in smoothly. There's like a barometric pressure sensor table. Based on how much atmospheric pressure limits your fueling quantity. There's
is there a coolant temp limiting table?
I don't know if there's that one.
High coolant.
It's been a minute since I've looked down there. I kind of just fixed them and don't worry about it anymore.
I assume there's some sort of timing limiter table where it won't let it put more timing in there.
There's there's timing limiting tables that say, okay, at like do never go above this amount or go below that amount. That one's rather easy. Like any of those you can mess with, it seems, because it's just going to go to the maximum there. Some people will max that out. I like to set realistic, like the highest timing I'd ever want to run. That way, if I ever fat finger something, it's going to be there to save me. But as far as like fuel quantity, like limiter tables, there's probably about a dozen, and I can't remember what they're all called. But they're pretty easy to see. It's like ones like when you're on the brakes, stuff like that.
So it's like some sort of torque management that knows when you're on the brakes, not let it.
A lot of my stuff's standalone, so like there's a lot of things it's mad at, and I have to go in and address. But for you, like some of it you'd probably want. Like if I could have a table that limited fuel on the brakes, I would probably tweak it a little bit, give myself more than they meant, but I'd probably leave it alone.
I assume there's some sort of speed limiter in there, so if you're over 100 miles an hour, it's not going to add any fuel.
There's a cruise control, like highest you can set the cruise control to. Limiter.
And that's adjustable.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's something. Mine wouldn't set mine where I wanted.
I was like, if you want to kill yourself, you put the number in.
So I put the number in. It works great.
But that's something like a beginner tuner could play with. They could go into the speed limiter table and be like, all right, I want to raise this. And then they go try to set their cruise control at 85 or 90 and be like, wow, that worked.
Yeah, sweet. Absolutely. For sure. And then, so go ahead and you can freshen up with the you go through all the tables. I mean, you can look at them, play around with them. And those are great little ones like that you could just mess with and feel cool about yourself and whatever. But yeah, so you can play with those, but get rid of those fuel limiters. And then once you get it to where you can achieve 150 mm's cubed across the RPM window, then you're like, okay, your limiters are out of the way. Now you can start messing with your actual contents of the different tables. And from there you can start playing with really.
Now, why did you pick the number 150? Is that what the stock
factory
tune?
Yeah.
So the factory max in 06 commands 150 cubic millimeters of fuel.
So in that US table, that US microsecond whatever table where we said, okay, at this much mm's cubed and this much fuel pressure, then it picks a US. The very bottom of the table is 150. Now, if you have a factory non-swapped truck, then I think you can scale it higher than that if you wanted to, but it's really just for your ease of tuning. Like, not even ease of tuning. Most people don't really need to mess with that. Like if you start talking like 2,000 horsepower, I wish I could, but since I'm a standalone and just the way I have it done, I have to, because it doesn't have a vehicle speed sensor, I have to limit it myself to 120. It will not go above 120. And so I have to do everything in that 0 to 120 range.
So a different strategy versus what you've done. I've seen other people go in and they go, hey, any engine can handle 10% more than the factory did. And so they'll pull up any table that has to do with fuel or timing, and they'll do a multiply by 1.1 or a 10% increase, hit it, send it, put it in there. But if you haven't taken care of the limiters, that's going to do nothing. It's just going to be riding against limiters most of the time already anyway.
It won't do nothing. Like you could do it. However, I feel like that's like the wrong way, because you're not really you're not able to actually do what you're wanting to do. You're just giving it 10% more fuel. And now you're like, if you did that in the US table, you'd get 10% more fuel, because now in order to inject 100 mm's cubed, it's going to think it has to use 10% more duration to get there. Well, your timing tables are all messed up. You're going to be doing it with the lower fuel pressure that you wish you had more, because generally fuel pressure cleans things up. But whatever. Anyway, starting off, like say, we get rid of the limiters, play around with the different like cruise control limits and stuff like that. Then from there, you have your big three, your US table, your fuel pressure table, and your timing table. So
basically the quantity of fuel is going to be controlled by the pressure and the on time of the injector, and then the timing is when it starts injecting the fuel.
And so I think I would start with the timing table. Obviously, if you want to make most power, going to the US table, that's where your gains are at. The top of the table is 1,890 US on most trucks. you can go considerably higher than that. But if you're learning how to tune, you don't want to be pushing everything to the max and then figuring out what you're doing wrong. It's better to 1890, a stock truck can take that no problem. And now you can start playing with timing. And even if you fat fingered it, you're not making enough power to where you probably hurt anything. And so
it's so opposite of gas stuff. They always start with the fuel because it makes a little change. The timing is where they add the power. That's also where it's dangerous. And you're feeling the other way. The timing is like at that low fuel quantity is not really that dangerous. And it doesn't really add a lot of power. It changes the characteristics a little. Yeah, but the fuel quantity is where you get in trouble on diesel.
Yeah, that's, because if you keep your US table capped like that, that's basically like putting a brick under your throttle. You can't give it full fuel. And now when you're doing your timing testing, you're limited to, call it 50% fuel. That way, if it doesn't work, at least you didn't screw it up at full power. You screwed it up at, 50 to 60%. And so to start off with, I would do timing. And I think early on, I tried to just kind of guess with what I wanted. Trying to use you just basically throw darts at a dartboard and see what happens. And if it works, cool. If it doesn't work, you try to figure out which one of the 5 or 4 tunes.
But there is a factory table you can look at.
So yeah. And that's
but it doesn't necessarily make sense because they...
Oh, it's terrible.
Oh my god.
Because they might be pulling timing somewhere to make the truck warm up or heat up a cad.
The timing table on the common rail is crazy. Like, what is the logic to it? There's got to be logic to it, but I sure don't know what it is.
So trying to learn from the logic there is
honestly,
not
the 0607 trucks... At least it kind of makes sense. You get like an 0305 truck. The timing table looks like looks terrible. Like there's just so much going on there that I don't know what they're trying to achieve, but it's not good. So like say early on, I would like play around with timings. I would say something I learned from a very reputable person, and I'm not like smart enough to figure this one out, but in EFI, there's a timing calculator. And it's extremely helpful, especially for the novice, to figure out, like, to put a timing table in this thing. So the timing calculator basically says, okay, in each of these cells, it calculates out and says, okay, this injector, you're at this many RPM and you're at this much duration of injection. That means the injection event is going to require, let's just say, 20 degrees of the engine rotation to inject all the fuel.
And how does it know that? It's calculating it somehow?
It's calculating it from your RPM and the desired US. And so it can know like in each of these. It
knows how long the injector's on. If it has RPM, it knows how many crank angles that would take.
Because the timing table is in RPM and desired fuel quantity. So EFI uses a calculator to say, okay, we know the RPM, and at this fuel quantity, we're going to be at this much fuel pressure. And at this much fuel pressure, it's going to require this many US of the injector being open. And so now it knows, like, okay, and behind the scenes, it's figuring out, okay, it's going to take 20 degrees of injection, 20 degrees of crank rotation for that injector to complete injecting. And so then it gives you a split calculator where it can say, okay, if you put, let's just say all 100, like you put 100% in that whole table, now it's going to set your timing in that table to whatever is required to inject 100% of the fuel before top dead center. And so
the percent is how much before top dead center in that table.
Yeah. And so if you say 100%, that means regardless of where you go, like it's going to have a bunch of 2s and 4s and 20s and everywhere. Like it doesn't matter, but the end of the injection at any point will be at top dead center because that's what you selected. Now let's just say you put 50s across the whole table. Well, now it's going to throw the numbers in there that are required. So half the injection event happens before top dead center and half the injection event happens after top dead center. And so once you understand that tool and you can use that tool, that really, really helps like novices to kind of know because but
as a novice, you still are going to need some base knowledge to know when do you actually want this fuel to burn. If you put it all in before top dead center and it all burns before top dead center, theoretically the engine would run backwards, right? If it all burned before top dead center, it wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't work. So there is some sort of delay in that, but knowing the mechanics of the engine, you want your peak cylinder pressure to happen 15 degrees after top dead center. But depending on how the fuel burns, that's why you need more or less timing depending on the quantity of fuel.
If you're going to tune your own vehicle, we're going to assume you have some basic level of engine competence. I mean, otherwise you should hire it down. Like you should be a hobbyist enough to realize for one, you can do damage to your engine. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And two, like you probably I'm not like calling anything out, but like you should have a little bit of a knowledge somehow, somewhere, do some research, get somewhere, find out something.
Know what you don't know.
Yeah, try to. I mean, you don't have to know
all
everything.
right, we're out of high school, Will. Let's go back to this.
You don't have to know,
discourse.
you have to know everything, but you should know some stuff
Just
before you start playing with this.
And that's what actually it's kind of cool, like the knowledge in 12 valves, because we do like set everything. Like that does help a little bit, just kind of like know approximately what your timing is. Something to keep in mind in that though, common rail injection pressure is considerably higher. And so injection event happens considerably faster. So like kind of keep that in mind. I would say for those that use the timing split calculator, again, that's what's nice about if you're tuning an MM3 truck, that MM3 software doesn't have the split calculator in it, but you create your tunes in EFI Live, and now you can use its split calculator to figure out what you want your timing to be, and then you can copy paste the file or the tables back into MM3. Obviously, there's a lot of different theories, a lot of different things to consider. I would say just for your starting out with a very conservative timing is about for 95% of everyone. 65% timing is very conservative. It'll spool chargers well. It's something you could just copy paste into a table across the whole board and it would work fine. 100% is going to be harder on head gaskets and things like that, harder on components, especially in certain situations, but it's going to be a little more efficient. And so that's kind of like, I think if you're a novice, you could stay in that range and do pretty dang well. I would say there's only two caveats to that would be, first of all, at idle. At idle, because the injection window is so short and because you're at such a low RPM, basically what I would do there is I would look at whatever the factory was having you idle at, start with that, and then you can start going higher, lower, kind of see what like maybe cleans up or sounds better or whatever else. But starting with the factory, whatever the factory timing was at idle is a great start there. And then the other caveat, it'd be at full power, full high RPM. Because that injection is so long, especially with stock or very small injectors, and you're talking about high RPM where everything's happening faster. If you try to put 100% split at the very top, at 3,000 RPM or 4,000 RPM at full injection, you're probably gonna be talking 50 degrees of timing.
Yeah,
that's kind of risky.
Yeah.
So like definitely put a cap on it. I think for you bone stock guys, a good cap on your timing is about 1 degree per 100 RPM. So if you're at 3,000 RPM, 30 degrees is fairly safe. Obviously, you're turning things up. You're pushing things harder than stock.
And you're saying for start of injection, 30 degrees.
Start of injection, correct.
And that's a high RPM. That's the nice thing. That's the reason that like common are so fun is you would not put 30 degrees in many stock 12 valves. You'd be blowing head gaskets because it's 30 degrees all the time.
Yeah.
Where you can do that on common, all of a sudden, like, man, this thing just pulls so good at a high RPM where my 12 valve didn't because I don't run that much timing on a street 12 valve, or that you can get that with the common rail. It's really, really quite nice. And the fact that since you can tune in there, you can get away with a lot more on the stock components.
And then, so yeah, that's what I would do. So I would kind of use your timing split calculator, keep it between, well, maybe not 65, let's call it 50 and 100. Play with that. And then once you're comfortable understanding how like you can drive it and you can feel like, oh yeah, I feel the difference here, you can wander outside of that, but just know the risks of, the different things. I mean, you can go lower, even 0%, but at 0%, the engine has to be kind of ready for it, because that means it has to burn like immediately in order to actually go down and make power, and explode and make power.
So if you were cold starting and your tune commanded that,
it would shut
after it tried to start, or if it did, it would almost shut the truck off because there's not enough heat to burn like that.
So the other part is your pilot. It would definitely require some pilot in order to stay running. So I shouldn't say it shut off, but it probably wouldn't be thrilled. And so you can play with that lower like 0 to 50 range, but just know that you're not being very efficient. You really would only do that to try to spool chargers and then get back out of that range. And then in order to operate in that range, you definitely need pilot. I'm kind of a fan of getting rid of pilot. Basically, I only use pilot where I need to, just because every time I get rid of pilot, it makes the truck run cleaner, and that's kind of important to me. I know a lot of people that use pilot, and trucks, they do, like if you're trying to spool chargers, they do spool better with pilot and lower timing, because if you get rid of pilot, you now have to run higher timing, and now you don't spool the charger as well. So it's kind of like a trade-off, but you can be cleaner doing it without pilot. So that's something for you to play with. If you're talking about very close to stock charger, you don't really have to overthink spooling it. I guess I didn't specify. I'm just kind of surprised. Pilot injection. So Main injection is your main window where everything happens. That's when your injector's open. That's where you're making power. There's 2 other injection events. You have your pilot injection, where it's a small little shot, and there's a table in there for how much injection you want. Generally, I mean, we're talking your main injections between 0 and 150 mm cubed. Generally, your pilot injection's like 0 to 6 or 0 to 8. Like it's very small, just pulse, just to get some heat in the cylinder, so it'll take the main shot and light off quickly. You can definitely put pilot in. Don't just get rid of it. I mean, you can for like a fuel mileage tune, but a little bit of pilot down low definitely helps it sound quieter, run smoother, everything else. And then you have a post shot that happens later. You can use that as a strategy to help spool up, but realistically, for most people, you can just shut that off. Just command 0 post injection, and you'll be fine. And like I say, maybe once you start understanding more, you want to start playing more, and you've exhausted different timings and stuff, you can throw some posts in there to see what happens. But for most people, just shut that off.
Now, if you had a newer truck with like a DPF, if you shut the post off, it's probably not going to have heat in the DPF. It might kill it.
Never tried it.
So basically, you're very targeted on this, like, you know, 03 to early 07 platforms. You start going outside of there, and man,
I have no idea. But yeah. Then what else we had? We had so we talked about your timing table. Then your fuel pressure table. Your factory fuel pressure table is pretty dang good. You can definitely bump it up a little bit. Something I would consider is if you are doing the tuning, you can also, if you have a 5.9 truck like we're talking about, they have a rail pressure sensor that reads to 180. With stock injectors, that's probably the right place to keep that sensor, but you got getting an upgraded injector that has higher pressure seals and stuff in it, you can start commanding more pressure, and you can either get a factory 6.7 sensor that reads all the way to 200 MPa, so now you can command that more pressure, or you can get a DDP 240 MPa sensor. Now you can command all the way up to, not 240. You want to command a little bit less than what the sensor can read, so call it 220 or something. That higher pressure, you're going to beat up your injectors faster, so don't do it like on all your tunes. But it is like for good power, like it really does help with power. And then to scale it for the DDP one, they'll tell you how to scale it. For the 6.7 sensor, all you got to do is get yourself a tune file from a 6.7 truck, like a 2008, and copy the contents of the fuel pressure scaling table into your older 5.9 file, and then that way it'll read correctly and you can command that pressure no problem. And then aside from that, you want to talk about your actual fuel pressure tables. You can play around in there. I would say one easy thing you can do is go to, again, your 6.7, your 08 6.7 tune table, and you can copy paste its fuel pressure table over into your 5.9. It's a little bit more aggressive with pressure, and pressure seems to really help clean things up. You put too much pressure in there, it becomes loud, and you can have some negative side effects, but like a mild bump like that is actually, it seems to work pretty good, but you can finesse it and do whatever else there. Trying to think what else I would need to know if I was trying to start out doing it. It's like a lot. There's like, and that's why it's like,
well, your advice is like really good about like start small and make sure you can quantify your changes. Like don't go and wreck your table. Don't do multiple things at one time. Like,
make sure, and data logging is your friend. That's huge, because data logging and seeing what limiters you're against, or just making sure that what you're asking it to do, it's actually doing. Because there's
desired versus what actual is. Like you can find problems there. Like what's going on. Like why am I not making power?
Yeah. Like, and if you have, let's just say your timing table, make sure your timing is following. Let's just say you turned off pilot, but there's a pilot timing coolant temp correction table in there that you may think that pilot's turned off. It's not. It's actually still going. Yeah. And so double check what you're doing is actually getting applied.
So a quick question that I actually don't know the answer to, a limiting table, let's say a timing limiter somewhere. Is there a limiting?
Yes.
So if you kind of forget that and you go, okay, I have programmed in 30 degrees of timing and for some reason it's only doing 20. Would it say 30 commanded or 20 commanded?
It would say 20.
The limiter would be what's commanded.
Yeah, correct.
So if it says
because the data log is showing what it's actually doing.
Okay, so it says commanded 20, you got 20, I'm like, but I put 30 in the table. So using that data log, you can say there must be a limiter somewhere, because I can go back and reference the table. Here's the conditions. I have this many RPM. This is my throttle input. It should be doing 30 degrees of timing at this RPM.
Yep.
It's not. what limiting table did I forget or miss?
Yeah. And then, I mean, especially if you know, like, okay, it's limiting at 20 for some reason, go down through your tables and try to find one that has 20 in that cell. Yeah. Like the timing limiting tables are very straightforward. There's like one box that says min, one box that says max.
Are there multiplier tables in this?
There are some like coolant temp and intake temp multiplier tables, and those are definitely funky to get your head around.
Because then if you're timing, let's say it was commanding 20, but the multiplier said if you're below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, you need to add 2% to this. And also you're like, where did this random 21%, 21 degrees of timing come from? That's nowhere in your table. It's usually multiplier tables that are doing weird stuff like that too.
And so there's some multiplier tables in there and stuff. So really what you'll do is that's not all. There's one for pilot timing and pilot quantity and main injection timing and stuff like that. So there's definitely a couple things that you'll have to go in and address. And it's not as simple as zeroing them all out, because sometimes you have to zero them out. Sometimes you have to put a max value in. So that's again, when you're talking about that very close to stock tune, start playing with that stuff, get the pilot and your timing and everything to do what it's being told. That way, when you go in and you turn it up and you escalate everything, you know it's going to do what you're asking it to do. And so that's a great thing to bring up.
Does EFI Live in the bottom when you're hovering over cell give you the max and minimum value that you can put in that chart?
So it has recommended and then absolute recommendations. So it has, this is the maximum we'd recommend, the minimum we'd recommend, and then it has like, this is the highest number you can possibly put in this table and the lowest number you can actually put in this table. It's not, I don't think it's when you hover over it. It's just like up top when you're in that table, it kind of tells you the max and min limits of that table.
So like the speed limiter, for example, let's say it's set at 99 miles an hour. Does it say 249 is the max?
Probably something like that. Yeah, it'll tell you that.
And so if you try to put 300, it just doesn't accept the value, or what does it do?
Actually, I think it caps it at whatever it says the max is. But like I said, there's a recommended max where it says, hey, we like I'm trying to think of a table that has this, like some of the limiter tables, it says, okay, we don't recommend setting this above 200, but you can set it all the way up to 400. And so if you put 400 in the box, it's going to say, actually the limit is like 399 or whatever, but like it'll say, okay, you put 400 in, we're going to put you at 399, and it's going to put a little like pattern around the outside four corners to kind of specify like, this isn't what we'd recommend. And you kind of have to go in and say, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
And do you think that's for safety, or do you think it causes weird software glitches sometimes?
Going into it, I was like, oh, it might cause weird software glitches. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that, because like a barometric pressure, like that table I'm talking about, your computer only commands, like the ECM only commands 150. So you could set it to 150 or 200 and those are fine. And then it's mad above 200. So I'm like, why would I set it to 400? Like I get like going above and beyond and setting it to the max possible value. Like, but why would you? And so I always like set it to wherever the recommended max was. Now, post facto, I have a couple, different tuners have like given me help along the years and sent me some of their files to say like, this is what I would do, like learn from it. They had maxed it out. So I'm like, okay, apparently it's like this guy who obviously has been around the block a couple times is doing that. Like, I'll just do the same thing.
Nice.
But
so this is kind of like maybe even more advanced, but you're kind of to the limits personally of what the stock ECM can do. Like you kind of feel like if for you've kind of went from the novice tuner to playing along, experimenting over the last 5 years to where you're like, I don't know if this computer's powerful enough for what you're doing now.
Yeah, I'd say the factory ECM has two main limitations that makes it harder to progress past where I'm at. Not to say you can't. There's lots of people that have, but it makes it harder. The first thing is predictability. If I'm going to, let's just say, load up a Hail Mary tune in my truck and try to make 2,500 horse or something, it would really suck if it didn't do what I was told it to do.
Yeah.
Because not only would it maybe not make 2,500 horse, but it would possibly just inject the fuel at the wrong time, or even like a limiter decided to randomly start working or something, and it would just not work and not make the number. So having that's one thing nice about standalone is all like, you gotta think, especially with I have a 0607 ECM in my second gen, all the sensors it wants, half of them are gone. Like it doesn't have its axle speed sensor. It doesn't have barometric pressure. It has none of these things. And so and it has transmission, it has a manual valve body. So there's transmission stuff missing. And so you got to think like in the ECM, it's going and saying, oh, like every time it wants to inject a certain amount of fuel, it has to say, okay, or this laundry list of limiters okay with this?
Every time.
every single time. And it's like, no, I don't care about those things anymore. You don't even have them hooked up. You have to like do stupid stuff to like get past them. And that's one thing nice about a Bosch or a standalone ECU is that it's designed to do what you're wanting to do. It's not having to run it past a laundry list of different things. It's going to say, okay, these 5 tables is how I decide how much fuel to put in. All 5 tables agree on this. I'm going to put it in.
Yeah.
Versus running it past like 100 different things.
And so that really kind of hurts your RPM potential because like how fast can your computer compute?
Yeah, exactly. And that is the second thing is, like I don't think there's like a horsepower limitation at like 3,000 or even maybe 4,000 RPM. Like
it's probably
the
fast
ECM operates fast enough. It seems to work really well there. Once you start talking in where it's capable of going to 5,000 RPM, but when you're trying to make big power with huge injectors where, in a stock injector, if it decided to hold it open another 100 US, whatever, like you probably won't even notice. It probably does it and you don't even notice. And when you have a 500% or something like that injector where 100 US is a 400 horse swing.
Yeah. It's a big problem.
That can definitely hurt some things, especially because who knows what the timing is during that when it's like adding an extra 100 US to it. Also, like if you want the injection event to happen at 40 degrees or let's just say 30 degrees at 3,000 RPM, yeah, it probably can do that. But all it takes is for it to be delayed at 5,000 RPM. It doesn't a couple microseconds.
And you're way off.
And now you're not at 40 degrees. You're at 42 or whatever the number is. And so that's where factory ECM has limitations is just predictability where I'd love to be able to just load up a tune and know exactly that's what it's going to do and have 100% faith that's going to do it perfectly. But then the second thing is
like a P pump.
Yeah, okay.
You said it and it does it perfectly every time.
So true. So true.
Now, what if you're wanting to get at an even more advanced tuning technique? So like, let's say you wanted to create a lope tune for your truck. How would you do that?
Why are we trying to tell people how to do this?
Because the audience wants to know, how do you make a lope tune?
All you got to do is screw it up just right. It's very easy.
But if you were to like coach somebody just like the 10-second version, how would you go about trying to make it lope at idle?
I've never done it with stock injectors, so it's hard for me to say.
How would you do it if you had big
you
injectors?
Know what? Before
you just make it at the bottom of the table too aggressive, so that way, because the factory it thinks like, oh, it's a little too low. We're gonna go from 8 mm cubed to 12 mm cubed. Well, if you make it so that is a 50 horsepower swing in fuel quantity, it's going to get there and be like, oh my gosh, this is way too much. Go back to 8. Oh my gosh, this is way too little. Go back to 12.
So she's basically making it overswing
and making it too aggressive
idle thing by making it too big of a...
I think if I had to play around with a lope tune, I mean, you're trying to basically, you set it to where like maybe the timing or some factor, maybe fuel pressure, whatever it is unrunnable at your demanded RPM, idle RPM. So that way it has to dip down to actually get the pressure up or putting the timing in the right spot or something to where then it has to, then it runs good, comes back up, goes back into that cell that's set too low, and then it keeps going back and forth. That's probably what I do, but I've never had the desire to figure that out. Big injectors, it's actually, you work quite hard to make it not do that.
They do that on gas cars. They call it like a ghost cam. But the way they keep the car idling is they control the timing. They're not changing the fuel quantity like that. They're controlling. And so it's basically like, hey, if you overshoot the idle target by 50 RPM, pull 10 degrees of timing out. Well, 10 degrees pulls out 50% of the idle horsepower. And so boom, it falls down. And then once it falls down, even just 50 RPM below, it's like, oh my gosh, we're way too low. Add 10 degrees back. And so it just hunts. It can never get to...
Which when the engine's cold, you could do that with pilot, because without pilot, it would just shut off. But that's the problem with idle. Like your timing cool, like it's going to burn regardless. The problem with doing that with timing with a common rail is that you're not really going to whether or not it's going to, like how much power it's making. It's going to go to whether or not it's running or not. And so
it's almost like shutting a truck off, turning it on, shutting it off.
And so you can probably get the right, I think that's where I'd start first, is try to get the right combo of like not too low to where it completely kills the event, but low enough that it doesn't make the power it should. But then hot versus cold affects it. So it'd be tricky. I guess I never cared enough to try. But big injectors, you try quite hard not to let that happen. Turn off pilot at a certain RPM, and then it'll just go back and on and off with pilot. As pilot turns on, it'll make power again, and pilot turns off, won't burn.
Yeah. What are maybe just let's give some people, we're about out of time here, but a couple simple tricks. I mean, we're not giving you real tuning advice. You need to figure this out on your own. But like one thing I had when I started tuning, even stock injectors, I had issues with smoke because I went to 12 valve timing. I thought, oh, I need a lot of timing, just like I did my 12 valve.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was towing my camper, I'm like, man, how's my common rail so dirty? Like it's dirtier than my 12 valve was. Mm-hmm. And so like a couple tricks on like, hey, you've got this thing going. It's running pretty good. It feels good, but you look at it and you always just have a little bit of haze, a little bit of stuff. Like what would you do to kind of clean that up?
That's where it's tricky. You had all that haze because your timing was way off.
Yeah.
And so my recommendation from earlier would be like stay in that 50 to 100 timing
split table on the
that
calculator.
Split table, that will keep you pretty close to the range.
And I was probably closer to 100, all the 100, 125, 150.
More. I mean, I remember back before I found the split table, before I did the math and or used that split calculator, I was just going off of like kind of guessing what it wanted.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to guess what one cell wants,
right?
Or maybe a row of cells, but you have a whole map of probably 150 cells. Like
and I just
chances
put it
of
right
getting that
12
right,
valve, like 12 valve for the win. Let's go. And it was not what it wanted.
Chances of getting them all right. No. So when I was looking at it, after I figured out, I was like, okay, what have I been at? Some of those cells were at 260%.
Yeah.
Which sometimes it runs okay at that, but in very specific situations, but not where those cells were.
No.
Like probably was not the play. And so keeping your timing in that range. If you have stockish injectors, generally, if it's being really hazy, to me, that can be because of too much pilot. So stockish injectors, you can stay with stock pilot quantities and be fine. When you start talking bigger injectors, you got to remember that
everything's bigger.
That 2 m³ of fuel is now more than it used to be. So you either need to rethink about how you're doing the MM3 table or rescale the pilot quantity table has its own US table. So you can rescale that US table with kind of the data from your bigger injectors. So that way you can command the same amount, but it'll actually be at least closer to injecting that amount. But yeah, if you have too much pilot.
At some point, the injector's so big, you can't just turn it on and off.
Yeah.
It's either going to be.
And ultimately, once you get to where your injector is that big to where it can't turn off on and off in the time you want, you really could consider just not using pilot. Once you set a big enough injector, you have to run timing. You have to use pilot in some situations when it's cold, you're trying to spool up, when you're running really, really low timing. But otherwise, you can just bump your timing up a little bit and then not run pilot in that situation, and you'll be fine.
Is this where you can spend a lifetime
you can spend
playing
a lot
with
of
stuff
time
on a tune?
playing with that?
Just trying to get rid of haze at idle, for example.
Mm-hmm. And so generally, the less pilot you put in, too little pilot at idle makes it loud.
Yep.
Too much pilot makes it hazy. So that's where the first thing I'd be looking is, okay, how hazy are you in that situation? In that situation where you're hazy, how much pilot do you have? Does it seem reasonable? Does it not? Another thing would be fuel pressure. If you're going down the road, like say you start trying to mess with your fuel pressure table, it's easy to fat finger and put too little pressure in an area. The factory table is pretty good. You can go in and like maybe times it by 10% or something. Yeah. And to just bump the table up or certain regions of it up. But if you did it yourself, I would begin. You're hazy going down the road. I'd be looking at your fuel pressure. Get in, either put a stock tune in your truck or get in someone else's truck and watch their rail pressure. You'd be like, wow, I am really low in this situation. Mm-hmm. I thought it was pretty reasonable, but even a stock truck's more. And so that'd be something to look at. Otherwise, if you're hazy, it could be your injection timing is just not quite right. The wide bowl pistons really don't enjoy injecting at top dead center. And so that's kind of a limitation you have with them.
And so wide bowl, you're talking 04.5 to 07.
Yeah. And so when factory tune, if you look at it, it's trying really hard to not inject at top dead center, which kind of hurts it for power and efficiency.
So it'll inject before or after, but not after, at TDC.
Yeah. And so you need to kind of look at that and play with that. And yeah, if you're injecting across top dead center on a wide bowl piston, it's going to be just a little bit hazy like that. And that's just kind of, I don't say the way it is. There's some things you can do to help it, but it's always going to be just a little bit hazy, at least up here. You get down in elevation, I don't know if the air is being more dense or what helps it out, but up here, it's just kind of, you have to try pretty hard to get them to clean up. So that'd be something, just looking at your timing and kind of making sure wherever, like you can do the math and figure out what the timing split is. A easy calculation I like to use, I use it all the time, is if you're trying to figure out what your timing split is or how long your injection window is, you can take your RPM times your microseconds of injection and divide it by 166,666. And that is the duration of how many degrees of injection you're injecting for. So you could take your 2000 RPM, 2000 US, do the math and say, okay, I'm injecting for, whatever the number is, 15 degrees. Okay, I'm at 8 degrees here. That puts me right in that, 100 or to 50% split. Now, if you do the math and you're at, 42 degrees of injection and you only got 20 degrees of timing in there, yeah, it's kind of low. You could probably clean it up some if you bumped it up. But yeah.
Well, man, I hope you guys digested all of that. We're about out of
It's a
time.
lot. I went into this thing and there's a couple basics we can cover. No problem. And I'm like, wow.
But it's why we get so many questions, because it's a pretty complicated subject.
And it's very easy to be like, yeah, I'm gonna tune my truck, and then you open it up and you're like, dude, I got 150 tables, all with 150 entries.
Yeah.
Where do you start? Start small.
Start small. Change one thing, timing table or something. Anyway, I do think it was fun. I enjoyed tuning mine. Obviously, Meyer handles a lot of it now, and we also have other people, but I still play with it a little bit here and there, and because it is fun, but really custom it to your preferences.
Yeah,
I mean,
it really is.
Yeah, you can really I'm going to clean this up a little bit, or I'm going to change my, speedometer, trans shifting. There's all kinds of stuff you can play with in there. It's really, really cool.
Like if your wife always brings the truck back on empty, you can rescale the fuel gauge to make it say empty when it's at half a tank, and she'll quit driving your truck. And you'll know that, hey, I've got half a tank.
You can do all that.
Or you can do the opposite. If you're trying to teach someone a lesson that never fills up the tank, you make it empty when it says like an eighth of a tank, and you'll leave some people inside the road.
I'm going to keep this in mind for the next time you ask for a revision.
Yes.
And I guess one last thing I will give a piece of advice. Save revisions.
Yeah.
Don't keep saving over and top the same file. Every time you make a change, save it as a new version type. So I'll do if I'm playing around with something, I'll name it whatever, and then V1, V2, V3, V4, V105.
Yeah.
Save the revisions, because if it doesn't work, you can then go back and you can use the compare function and be like, okay, it's been a month. What did I change? Because it definitely doesn't like it. So,
and probably don't use ABC, because there's only 26 variations there.
You'll run out very quickly.
You're gonna run out.
That's very true.
Very true. So
most of my trucks have at least 100 revisions on them.
Yeah, like I say, when we say it's going to take your time, we're not joking. It really will. But if you're hobbyist and you got time to do, it's fun. Tune at night, whatever, load it up, run it for a couple of days, play around. So, Meyer's looking up something here right now.
I'm looking at 100, and I think I'm at 119 on the one, divided by. So that's 19.8 hours of waiting for a file to load. Approximately.
Just programming
it's
time
sitting
on
there,
the vehicle.
just twiddling your thumbs. Let's see if I'll blow it up this time.
Yeah. So it will take your time, but if you're hobbyist, it's well worth it. And we have a lot of fun tuning our stuff here. And anyway, I highly recommend it if it's something you're interested in. If not, we can help you out. Give us a call and we can get some tunes and all that kind of stuff. We're happy to help you out, but also happy for people wanting it themselves.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's going to wrap this episode, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you stick around to the end, and we'll see you next time on the Power Driven Podcast.